afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina right here on WWBG 1470 AM and Tobacco Road Sports Radio. What an unbelievable, and when I say unbelievable, I emphasize unbelievable show we have for you on this second day of December. It's the eve of championship Saturday in college football. We're not going to talk about the Hornets today. Why? Because it's championship week in college football. We're not going to talk about the Carolina Panthers who are on a bye. Why? Because it's championship Saturday in college football. We're not going to talk NC basketball. We're not going to talk Wake Forest basketball. We're not going to talk NC State basketball and Duke basketball. Why? Because it's championship Saturday coming up in college football. What do you think we're going to talk about? That's right. Championship Saturday coming up tomorrow in college football. And believe me, folks, we are going to emphasize, and I mean emphasize, the ACC Championship in a little bit when Clemson will take on North Carolina, and we'll highlight that game. But before we get to that game, folks, so much to talk about in college football with these games coming up tomorrow. And I'm going to tell you straight up, when you look at these Power 5 championship games, none of them scare me except one. None of them scare me, at least as far as the college football poll goes coming up on Sunday. And let me explain why. Okay, first of all, you got Kansas State playing number 3 TCU. TCU just has to win. They win, they're in. Very simple. They're undefeated. It doesn't matter if they win pretty. Doesn't matter if they win ugly. As long as they win, they are in. Meanwhile, Georgia is playing LSU. Georgia ranked number 1 in the country. All you got to do is win. Doesn't matter if it's beautiful, if it's ugly, if it's only okay. You win, you're still undefeated, you are in. Far as Purdue and Michigan ranked number 2. Michigan, just win. That's all you have to do. Doesn't have to be beautiful, doesn't have to be pretty. It could be ugly. As long as you win, you're in. Those 3 matchups are simple, folks. Go to the field, do what you need to do, and win. The top 3 ranked teams, if you just win, you are in. But the 4th ranked team, which is the USC Trojans, and I talk about them sneaking in. They deserve to be in. They deserve to be in. But first, they got to take care of business versus number 11, Utah. And that's not going to be easy. They can't win ugly. They can't win close. This is a game I believe USC has to go into and has to win in a convincing fashion. Do they have to blow them out by 30 or 40? No, and they're not going to. But they got to beat them. And people say, well, why, Larry? Why in this game different than every other game? And I'll tell you why. Because it was not too long ago, roughly a little less than 2 months ago, USC lost to Utah and Cameron Rising by the score of 43-42. That's right. Cameron Rising went completely off the Utah quarterback. 415 yards he threw for in this game. He threw 2 touchdown passes. He rushed for another 3. Meanwhile, he hit his tight end, Dalton Kincaid, 16 times for 250 yards and a touchdown. Can he do that again? If so, USC could be out of the college football poll. And let me explain something to you. The college football poll is trying to find a way to fit Ohio State or Alabama or both into this football playoff. They're not going to be able to do both unless a couple of these top 4 teams lose, which I don't see happening. But USC has to win. Now, don't get me wrong. Caleb Williams went off in this game as well. He had 381 yards on October 15th versus Utah, 5 touchdowns, but he was sacked 4 times. Sacked 4 times in this game. USC is going to have to protect Caleb Williams if they plan on winning this game. Meanwhile, wide receiver Mario Williams of USC had 145 yards on 4 receptions. And also Jordan Addison had, I believe, 106 yards and a touchdown in that game. But this isn't the only loss, the only blemish, the only ugly thing on the resume of USC is this loss to Utah. They have to go there. They have to commit. Alabama and Ohio State are sitting down watching football, but they can gain ground if one of these top 4 teams loses. This is the game that scares me. Number 11 Utah at number 4 USC. We'll see what happens, folks. Look out for that game. Huge, huge game. But there's a bigger game involved here in the triad. It's number 9 Clemson 10-2 versus the North Carolina Tar Heels 9-3. And I'm going to tell you right now, if it comes down to quarterback play, North Carolina will win this game. I said it. North Carolina will win this game. Why? They have a much better quarterback. Drake made, 298 out of 440 completions this year. Over 3,800 yards. 35 passing touchdowns. I think another 5 rushing touchdowns. Only 5 interceptions. I am not sold on DJ Uiagalelei. Okay? This is a guy that hasn't shown me much this year. He's only thrown for 2,500 yards, 22 touchdowns, and he has 7 interceptions. Can he win the big game? I don't think he can. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, Clemson does have an unbelievable running attack with Will Shipley, who has over 1,000 yards this year, 14 touchdowns. But Elijah Green, the running back of North Carolina, has been really playing well the last couple of games, and he's going to need to play this game. Has to be the career game. He has to show up, folks. He has to show up, and he has to have a career game. Josh Downs has been tremendous all year for Drake May. 929 yards, 11 touchdowns, 83 receptions. Clemson has the much better defense here, folks. There is no doubt who has the better team. Clemson is favored by 7.5 points in this game. Now, North Carolina coming off 2 tough losses, one to NC State 30-27, and then previously the upset by Georgia Tech 21-17. But Clemson is favored by 7.5 points this game. I would take that with a grain of salt, folks. When I look at this team offensively, in all categories, maybe except rushing, UNC is better. Where UNC fails is on the defensive side of the ball. They give up way too many points. The highest scoring this game is, it could be the advantage of UNC because Carolina will have the belief they can score on Clemson at will and win this game. But at the end of the day, you got to protect Drake May. Drake May has been sacked twice as much as Uiagalelei this season. So that the 2 main things going to come down to is that Carolina defense has got to come to play. It has got to come to play. You can't give up 60, 65 points to Clemson and expect to win. You have to come and you have to have a well-balanced offense. The more Elijah Green can run the ball and they can do more play action, the better for Drake May and the better for this Tar Heels team. I would not be surprised, folks, if this Tar Heels team comes in and upsets Clemson this weekend. My pick this weekend is University of North Carolina, your ACC champs. All right. Has a good ring to it, don't it? That's my pick. I am definitely picking them. I think overall, I'm not sold on Clemson. I think they're overrated, and we'll find out this Saturday as it's 7 p.m. on ABC. Now, folks, we have a championship caliber show for you today as well. We just talked about quickly about the championship games And I wanted to go over that quickly with you because we have two guests coming up after the commercial break here. We are going to have former Miami Hurricane, two-time national championship head coach Dennis Erickson joining us. Then after Dennis Erickson, we're going to have former Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Washington Redskins, Super Bowl champ, Super Bowl MVP, Doug Williams joining us. It's going to be a great show, folks. And believe me, next week, we'll talk about all the other sports going on in the Carolina area. So let's go ahead. Let's get ready for a break. Sit back and enjoy the following interviews coming up right after these commercial breaks. We'll be back right after this. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina here on WWBG 1470 AM and Tobacco Road Sports Radio.com. And I'll tell you what, folks, you know, every year through Thanksgiving, we talk about how thankful we are. And boy, I could not tell you how thankful we are here at Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina to have our next guest with us. Listen to this. He coached at Idaho, Wyoming, University of Miami, Oregon State University, Washington State, Arizona State, also did 10 years in the NFL with the Seattle Seahawks and San Francisco 49ers. But it gets better, folks. The guy has won 2 national championships, Big Sky champion, 2-time Pac-10 champion, 3-time Big East champion, 2-time Sporting News College Football Coach of the Year, 3-time Pac-10 Coach of the Year, 3-time Big East Coach of the Year, and he is in the Washington Sports Hall of Fame. It is my great honor, thrill, and pleasure to welcome on our WWBG 1470 AM and Tobacco Road Sports Radio.com hotline. Let's welcome in Coach Dennis Erickson. Coach, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Larry. How are you?
Coach, I'm doing good. Thank you so very, very much joining us here on Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina. And I want to start right off, Coach. You know, you did a tough thing. In 1989, you take over a Miami Hurricane football team that was previously coached by legendary coach Jimmy Johnson. How difficult was it for you, Coach, to come in after a coach like Jimmy Johnson? I mean, obviously you won the national championship your first year, but how difficult was it to come in right after Jimmy Johnson left for Dallas?
Well, I'll tell you, it wasn't easy, Larry. I mean, it's a lot. I've gone into programs that hadn't been winning, and that was a heck of a lot easier than, going into a program like the University of Miami and following Jimmy. But the bottom line is I didn't change a lot of things. They bought into what we were doing. We didn't change a lot of things. We believed in them. And once we got on campus, once we got into spring football, they knew that things weren't going to change. They were going to be the same. Offensively, obviously, we changed some things because we were probably one of the first that went to the one back and no motion and all that type of thing. But the biggest thing is we just let them play. And the bottom line for me, every place I've coached is the door is always open. So I had a lot of conversations when I first got there with those players and my assistant coaches, and I kept some. It just worked out really good, and they played their rear end off. There's no question about that. And football was important to them, and the tradition was important to them. But staying with that was a little harder than people might think.
Now, let me ask you this. 2 years later, Coach, in 1991, you go undefeated, but Washington goes undefeated as well. You're the national champion in the AP. They're considered the national champion, I guess, in the coaches poll or whatever you want to call it. First of all, it's a two-part question, but do you feel that year that A, you were a better team than Washington, and B, would you have liked to have the opportunity that they have today to go ahead and battle it out with Washington to see who was the better team?
Well, there's no question that obviously both teams wish that we had a playoff. I was born and raised in Seattle, Everett, Washington, so I knew a lot about the Huskies when I was growing up. So it was kind of an interesting thing that we were tied for that. And who knows who was the best team? And we were awfully good. They were awfully good. It's hard to figure. I don't think anybody would know. I do know that ever since that year, coming back and forth to Seattle and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, that always comes up. Who would have won that championship? And of course, all the Huskies said, "Oh, we would have won," and I said, "No, we would have won." So who knows? But I think it might have started the idea of having a playoff. They should have. I think it would have been one of the great games of all time.
And let me ask you this, Coach, before we get into the talking about playoffs or what should, this and that. You had a knack for everywhere you went. I mean, whether it was Arizona State, Oregon, I think 2 years after you got there, you went 11-1, if I remember correctly. What was it about your coaching style, in your opinion, that seemed to get the most out of your players and get them to want to win for you?
Just being fair with them, creating a relationship. It's all about culture and them believing in you and you believing in them. And, I was the type of coach that, I demanded discipline, but I wasn't a hard ass by any means like a lot of guys. And, I listened a lot. I talked, but I listened a lot. Every place I was, I'd bring players in and talk about what they think. And, so they really felt comfortable coming in and talking about football, life in general. And so when they trust you, you got a pretty good chance to win.
Now, Coach, you did a couple of tenures in the NFL. Let me ask you this. What, besides the speed of the game, what was from a coaching perspective, what was the biggest difference between the NFL and college for you?
Well, it was obviously the speed of the game. I made some mistakes, and when I went to the NFL, I got talked out of doing the things that I believed in offensively. We started back many, many years ago when I worked at Jack Elway. We started the one back, no back, all the things that people are doing right now all the time. And so when I went to Seattle, I had a good experience there. We turned that thing around and got things going the right direction. And, they made an ownership change. And, Paul bought the team and a different general manager. But we had that thing going in the right direction. With one thing is if I would have just stayed with what we do offensively, but I got talked out of it by the gurus of the NFL. Now everybody's doing it. And so I got talked out of it. But the San Francisco thing was a joke for me. It was stupid. It was a situation where I was at Oregon State, probably the happiest I've been in my life. We won a lot of football games, turned that thing around. But, the ego took care of that, trying to go back to the NFL and win again. And I chose a bad franchise at that time. Obviously, it's one of the greatest ones now. But, there was changes ownership-wise. Eddie had just couldn't coach any longer, and York came in, and it was just kind of the beginning of that. And we were over the cap a long ways when I got there, and I didn't do my homework. And, that lasted 2 years. I couldn't wait to get out of that. But, it's different. To me, the players are in the NFL. I mean, they listen, and when you have something to talk to them about, but they're making a lot of money. But it's still the same. I mean, they still want to win and still want to do the right things. And like I said, that first tenure was, I really enjoyed it. But it's a little different because they've been there, obviously, and a lot of them know a lot of things that's going on. But it was totally different, just mainly because of the ownership. I mean, they could wake up on the wrong side of the bed and fire you. And, today, that's just as you see now.
Right. Coach,
so
and
that's a
that's
bad decision. I wasn't fit for that. I wasn't really fit for that league, to be honest.
And, you see in college football nowadays, Coach, and you just brought up a great point, that it's win now or lose your job in college football. And it doesn't seem like they give some of these coaches even time to build a program because, as you know, usually obviously when you take over a program, it's not your recruits. Yes, you have the transfer portal now and things you didn't have back then, but isn't it more of an urgency for coaches to win nowadays in college football than it ever has been in the past?
Oh, yeah, without a question. It's almost to a point of ridiculous. And the things that have changed, it's just unbelievable. People aren't patient. Fans aren't patient. The administration, a lot of it wouldn't know if it was pumped or stuff. They're making decisions on the football program, and then the CLA and all the new things that are happening right now is totally different. To be honest, coaching college football at the highest level, with transfer portal, the IL, all the things that are happening right now, it's all about money. And it's to me, I don't like where it's going, but I do like college football and I watch it. My favorite thing to watch probably is the 1AA, the Big Sky. The Montana State,
yep.
North Dakota State. And they're having a playoff, but that's true football anymore. I mean, you get transfers, but they transfer down because they can't play wherever, and you put them in the program, and they get a chance to play. And so I enjoy watching that because they're playing it for the right reason. And so I watch a lot of that. I went to school at Montana State. My son is a coach at the University of Montana, so I follow that quite a bit on Saturdays. But I got my teams. I have Oregon State, Washington State, of course, Miami. There's a lot of teams that I coach and I watch, and some of those teams, for example, Washington State, Oregon State, they don't have enough money to compete with the SCs or the Alabamas or whoever that are, actually paying players to play. Until they get that straightened out, the Power 5, it's going to be a mess.
Coach, let me ask you this. Now we got the transfer portal and all this in college football. And I had the great legendary Jackie Sherrill on one of my shows, and we were talking about this, and it'll be a great subject to talk to you about. And it came up, and it was an interest. He loved the question, but you started coaching early, in the 80s and stuff like that. Could you coach today the kids you can't coach them the same way you did the kids in the 80s. How much more difficult would it be for you to coach someone today than it was back in the 80s?
I think it would be a little bit, without a little bit question, a little bit different. I mean, back in the 80s, it's just a matter those guys love to play. Not that they don't now, but when you're dealing with the image and likeness type thing, and a guy now all of a sudden can, after 1 year, transfer someplace else and be eligible right away, and then it becomes a competitive, how much money, I'm playing at school X and school Y comes in. I'm a great player at school X. School Y comes in, and somehow that guy goes into the portal, and now it becomes a bidding war in the portal for a college kid that's a freshman in college or senior in high school. And to me, it's totally ridiculous. That's not how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and I agree. I agree 100% with you. Coach, and we talked earlier about the playoffs. What is your opinion on them going to this 12-game playoff system they're talking about doing in a couple of years?
I think it'd be great. I really do. You find out who the best is. You have buys for guys that are rated in the top 4. I mean, it's like I said, the 1AA playoffs start this week, and it's fun. People used to say, well, it's too many games. Well, I totally disagree with that. So your top 4 teams are going to get a bye, and they're going to work it out where it's fair. But to me, I'm surprised that they're not doing it because they're so money hungry at the NC2A.
Right.
At the level right now that, playoffs make them a lot of money. But I just think it's great. I think it's great for football to have a playoff, and for the fans, I think it would be awesome. So hopefully that gets done. I just like it, 12 team or whatever it might be. Get more teams involved in it, and just find out who the champion is.
Coach, a couple more quick questions for you before we let you run on this holiday. If I'm a player of your team, I'm not in the top 4 of a championship playoff right now that's going on. I have a chance to be a top draft pick. What is your thoughts about players opting out of bowl games?
Well, that's been something that's been going on for quite a while. That's not new. And the reason, I guess, is because of the injury factor. I personally don't like it. I don't think that they're going to get hurt any more in that game than they would in any other game during the season. So I don't understand that. But that to me, I don't agree with it. And maybe a playoff will keep them all playing, and have a real national championship. But if you're a good player and you're playing in the whatever bowl. It doesn't count for a national championship. A lot of those guys say, well, why would I play in this to get a ring or whatever? And so some of them opt out. And then you got the agents. I mean, you got all these guys around telling them not to play. And I mean, it's an issue. But I believe they should finish the season. That's how I was raised in coaching, and that's what I believe in. But it's up to them. They make a decision.
Right.
And if they want to do it, I respect that. But my opinion is they should play. But
yeah, and that's my opinion as well. Coach, last question. We got about 15 seconds. In your opinion, from what you've seen this year, who is your pick to win the national championship?
Well, I believe it's going to be Georgia. And they're playing well. They got a lot of skill. They've got close games. All of them have close games. And you got Michigan, Ohio State. USC is starting to play pretty well if they get into the playoffs. So,
right.
Yeah. It's kind of exciting, but I'd have to go with Georgia.
All right, my friend. Well, listen, I want to thank you.
Now, wait a second. Who would you go with?
You know what? I like Georgia, too. I agree with you. I think Georgia, by far, is the best team. But if USC does get in there, like you say, they can find a way to squeeze in there. I'm a big Caleb Williams fan. He's shown me a lot this year, the quarterback out there. I wouldn't mind seeing them win it if it's my choice on who wins it.
I totally agree. He's special. And the other guy special, showed it last Saturday, was Nick at Oregon, playing hurt. I mean,
what a difference between Auburn and where he's at now, huh?
Yeah, exactly. You got it.
Yep. Well, listen, my friend, thank you so very, very much taking time out of your busy schedule to joining us on Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina.
All right, buddy. Thank you. Talk to you later, Larry.
All right. Thank you so much, Coach. All right. That was Coach Dennis Erickson. Wow. Had 179 wins, 96 losses, and 1 tie in his career. We'll be back right after this message. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina, right here on WWBG 1470 AM and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. Boy, what a show we've had. And folks, I'm going to tell you what, we're talking about championship week in college football. And I'll tell you what, we couldn't have had a better guest than we have currently right now on our WWBG 1470 AM TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com hotline than a man who's won 3 SWAC championships, former Tampa Bay Buccaneer and Washington Redskin quarterback. He was Super Bowl champ, Super Bowl MVP, and there's so much more to go along with this guy. Let's welcome in the great legendary quarterback, Doug Williams. Doug, how you doing?
I'm doing good this morning. How you doing? Coming off this Thanksgiving full, man. I think I overdid it. I ate too much.
Yeah, I have that habit of doing that myself. I have to admit that. Hey, Doug, I couldn't think of a better time. We were just talking earlier in the show about the championship week coming up. And I know how when you were at Grambling State, you won 3 SWAC championships. So just fitting that you happen to be on this week. And, I want to start out with, your college days, playing at Grambling State and playing under the great, great coach of Eddie Robinson. How influential was Eddie Robinson, not just on the football field to you, Doug, but also in life as general? How was that?
I think that was the biggest impact that Coach Robinson had on all of us. Excuse me. But Coach Robinson was a guy. We knew about his coaching, his system he had in, everything. But the thing that Coach Robinson brought to us every day was real life. He talked about what you had to do on campus, don't put your hands on the women, and what you got to do to survive out there in America. But at the same time, during those 3.5 hours before that, he coached us harder than anybody else. So by the time you got to practicing and stuff, and you sit down and listen to him, you were too tired to do anything else. So whatever he said to you stayed with you, and it resonated with you. So his influence was something that I don't think anybody could sneeze up on. You almost got to be going there to really understand the impact that Eddie Robinson had on your life and people before you and even after you, your kids' life. I mean, that's the kind of guy Eddie Robinson was, because when you raising kids, you use some of Eddie Robinson things, for your kids to grow up, and they all appreciate it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, in 78, you picked in the first round by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who they've been in existence 2 years maybe at that time. I think they won 2 games before you got there, and you obviously go there. Talk about your initial, obviously you're happy to be drafted. Every young man is when they get the opportunity to play in the NFL. But what was your initial thoughts when you go, okay, I'm being drafted, but I'm going to a team that, hasn't won more than 2 games in the whole history?
Well, you know what, Larry? I think I was naive to that fact. That didn't bother me. All I knew, I got an opportunity to play. I won where I was. I didn't know anything but winning. And then went to Tampa. The touring and whatever didn't bother me. The most important thing, I got a chance to play with some guys and they wanted to win. That was the key. And we was fortunate enough that year, we won 5 games, and that was 3 more than they had won in 2 years. So we was able to realize that we had talent on that football team, and we couldn't go nowhere but up. And the following year, we was able to end up in the championship game against the Rams. And unfortunately, we lost that game 9-0. But the fact that at 4 years, we come from a 2-win in 2 years to 5-win in 1 year, then all of a sudden we division of champ, which will let you know that we had talent on that football team. So that never bothered me. It was just a matter of getting the opportunity to play. That was the most important thing.
And play you did. You guys went to the playoffs 3 times when you were there, like you said.
3
right. And
5 years, right.
3 out of 5 years. And then, of course, the downfall is there's a contract dispute, which we hear about day in and day out with different players having these situations. But it seemed like such a few dollars in the overall spectrum of things. What was your thoughts then? You're talking a difference of $200,000 where at that time owner Hugh Culverhouse. Was this more of a money situation in your opinion? Was it a racism thing? Because you weren't getting paid, if I remember correctly, Doug, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was backup quarterbacks actually making more money at that time than you were.
Yeah, my last year there was in '82, and I was the 54th highest paid quarterback in the whole league. So just imagine with 32 teams in the league and you're the 54th highest paid, there's a lot of backup making more money than you. I mean, my backup on my team, Mike Ray, made more money than me. So that was one of those things, and it's unfortunate because '83 I didn't play not one down of football because of the contract situation. And free agent, I was a free agent per se, but free agent then wasn't what free agent is today. Tampa had all the power at that particular time over free agent because if anybody had assigned me, they would have had to give Tampa 2 first-round draft picks. So nobody was signing anybody during that period of time, free agents, and no collective bargain agreement and all that. That wasn't in place. So therefore I had to sit out a whole year.
Right, and you did sit out. Then you went back to the USFL, and they talk about the biggest thing, and I hear so many football players and executives say this, is it's about building relationships, and you had built a relationship actually all the way back to Grambling State with Coach Joe Gibbs, who then with Washington Redskins head coach gives you an opportunity to come back. Talk about your relationship with Joe and how much it meant for you to get the opportunity to go to Washington and obviously do the ultimate goal, which is to win, not just win a Super Bowl, but you win the MVP of the Super Bowl as well.
Well, Coach Gill was in Tampa when my rookie year.
Right.
And that's the best thing that happened because during that time, and even early on, that was a contract dispute, my coming in as a rookie. So I sat out a whole week. So when I came in, Joe Gibbs took me by my hand, and every day we went to Joe Gibbs' house and sat at his dinner table every night during training camp with his wife and bless their soul, his 2 sons, and ate dinner every night because Joe Gibbs went through the whole playbook with me to catch up with everybody else. And he did that 1 year there, and then all of a sudden he got a job up here in Washington. Went back, I think, with Carrier, then came to Washington. And when the USFL folded in 1986, Joe Gill was the only coach in the National Football League who gave me a call. And he asked me, could I come to Washington to be his backup quarterback? And I told him yes, because I didn't have a job. And the rest was history. I came to Washington in 86, did not play in but one game through one pass all of 86. And 87 was the year, So everything goes credit to Joe Gibbs, man, because if it was not for Joe Gibbs, I wouldn't have had that opportunity.
And, so much came out of this for you. We've heard so many, obviously you grew up hearing different things about, can a black quarterback win the Super Bowl? Can they play in the NFL? Are they intelligent enough? All this different stuff, and we can go on and on and on. And how big was it for you to be the first quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl, or was that made more of a deal than you would have liked it to be?
Well, let me say this. It's a great deal to me, but it's also, in a way, a great disappointment because there was guys before me that didn't get an opportunity. So we don't know whether anybody else would have had a chance to play in the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl if they had been given the same opportunity that I was given. So from that standpoint, that part kind of trying to get the best of me. But I'm grateful for being the first one to play in the Super Bowl and have an opportunity to win it and be named MVP. I'm always be grateful for that, but I always think about the guys who did not have a chance like I did.
And, you talk about chances, and it brings up a subject, and I know you're an advisor now with the Washington Commanders, but, the big issue over the last, it's been for a while, I shouldn't say the last 5-6 years in the NFL is, how can we have a league that 70% of the players are African-American, but yet we can't get enough coaches that, black coaches in the NFL? And my question to you is, and I want to talk first real quickly about the Rooney Rule. I'm not a fan. I'm going to be right up front with you. I like what the Rooney Rule stands for, but I don't like how it's being executed. And let me explain to the listeners out there, and I'd love to get your take on this. you're finding opportunities that are out there, Doug, and correct me if I'm wrong, where people are interviewing black coaches candidates just to appease a rule with no intention of actually hiring that coach, which I believe is completely wrong, abusive, any word you want to use. What is your thought of the Rooney Rule, and how do we get more coaches or black candidates either available or hired as head coaches in the NFL?
Well, let me say this. I'm kind of with you. You know, when the Rooney Rule first came out, I was a fan of the Rooney Rule because I thought everybody was going to be fair, going to do it the way it was meant to be done. And what has happened over the Rooney Rule life has been the NFL owners have circumvented the Rooney Rule and only used the Rooney Rule as to interview a minority candidate and then hire the guy that they want to hire. I do think that's what has happened, and that is unfortunate. And the thing that gets me more than anything is, and I don't understand, is that when you got over 65 to 70% of your players are minorities, and you don't look at it from a standpoint of how these players would respond to a black guy coaching them. See, I think that's where a lot of owners get caught up in. Now, don't get me wrong. You know, the Andy Reeds and the Sean Paytons and a lot of other coaches do a great job, Bill Belichick, with whatever team they got. But there are some teams that are built, to be honest with you, for a minority coach to get an opportunity to coach. And don't tell me about the pipeline. Ain't no coaches out there. The pipeline being full. The problem has been they won't release the valve. Let them out of the pipeline. That is the problem, man, and that is so unfortunate. And the Rooney Rule, like you say, has not worked the way it was intended to work.
Now, Doug, I'm going to ask you a question that I'm very comfortable asking. I can tell when I talk to someone how comfortable I can get asking a question, but is the problem in the NFL, and it's a very direct question, but you're actually 11 years older than I am, Doug, so you even lived through more than I've had to live through. But my question to you is, could we be in a situation where the owners in the NFL grew up in an era where racism was probably, as far as you and I know it growing up, was at its peak, and they were brought up a certain way? And is it possibly a situation where we need a turning of the guard from an age group in the NFL at the ownership level before maybe we can go ahead and, get this thing fixed and get the opportunities for these black coaches to be hired?
Well, let me say this. I think we've come a long ways from that ownership standpoint, but I do think it's ownership.
Right.
We got to understand a lot of it is hand-me-down, is raised and all this.
Right.
So I think the mentality is the same. The most important thing, when you look at this thing realistically, and I've been around the league a while, is who you comfortable with. Who I don't mind sitting at the dinner table with, drinking coffee or sitting around the fireplace talking to. Are you comfortable with a black coach sitting at the same table with you? And you see, that's the most important thing is comfortability. And I think what has happened, these owners who has the right to hire whoever they want to, when they get these headhunters who they sit out there to pick the right coach, don't always pick the right coach. You look around this league, and you see some of the coaches that's in this league and how they fared over the last year or so, in the last few years, and they get rehired and rehashed and everything else. It's the same old thing. Because why? That's who they was comfortable with.
Right.
And so that's what it boils down to be honest with you.
Now, before I let you run here, I want to ask you a couple things on the college level. First of all, how great of an opportunity was it for you to go back to Grambling State as a head coach where you actually played your college career?
That's interesting because that was a great opportunity. Like today, we have Deion Sanders back at Jackson State where, 98, I was at Grambling, and what Deion has done, we was doing then. We got some pretty good athletes, and we won 3 straight championships. at the same time. But it wasn't a lot of hoopla at the black colleges at that time. And with Deion going in and who Deion is, I mean, he's done a terrific job at Jackson State. You're talking about a Hall of Famer. All that plays into Deion going back and getting it done, kind of like when I went back and was able to do the same thing that Deion is doing now. It's a great time, and we need people who can do that. And we got people who can do it if you give them an opportunity. But coaching at the historical black college is not just a regular coaching job, because it's more than just a coach. You got to be a little bit of everything. You got to be the register. You got to make sure they get cafeteria. You got to be the housing director. It's a whole lot of things goes into coaching at HBCU compared to the other colleges.
Does it concern you if Deion leaves for coaching position like Colorado? They're talking University of South Florida, which you know well. I mean, does it concern you that the HBCU schools are going to take a back seat now? Or like you said, do you think somebody else will step up?
It does concern me. And if Deion has to offer, you can't get mad with Deion if he gets an opportunity like that.
Sure.
I'm for Deion. If that's what he wants to do, I think he has to make that decision, at the end of the day. But like you say, when we take a hit at historical black colleges, I'm going to say yes. I could be wrong. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm really hoping I'm wrong, because Deion brought a lot of spotlight to Jackson State first, and then the spotlight was so bright that it shone over all the HBCU. So my thing, if he leaves Jackson State, there is a possibility that we don't have that light shine as bright as it shine, unless we had somebody within the commissioner office, the university, and everywhere else who was able to kind of get those supporters and those sponsors and everybody to keep them within the black college. If that happened, feel pretty good. If not, I think it's going to happen.
All right, I have to ask you this, Doug. Jackson State versus Southern, SWAC Championship this weekend. Who wins?
Well, you know what? I like for it to be a good game, but I think everybody, wherever you are, going to say it's going to be Jackson State. Talent-wise, Jackson State, Deion has done a tremendous job. You got to be honest with it. And right now, if you was a bet man, which I'm not a bet man, but if you got any kind of sense of watching football over the last year or so, there's nowhere in the world you're not going to pick Jackson.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I still had to ask you for the listeners. Well, listen.
Oh, that makes sense.
Well, listen, Doug, I want to thank you very, very much taking time out of your busy schedule to join me on Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina today, and happy holidays coming up to you and your family.
Thanks, Larry. Appreciate it, man. Glad to have you on.
All right. Thank you. Be safe. All right. That was the great, legendary Doug Williams. Ladies and gentlemen, we are out of time here. We are out of time. Another great week here on Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina. We'll be back next week with another great show. Enjoy the ACC Championship, baby.